The Age of Discovery. The 16th century brought an increase in exploration, and with it a demand for more accurate maps. These bold explorers also rapidly expanded the map, bringing back new and increasingly accurate information. A savvy cartographer always had connections with sailors and merchants to send apprentices along or buy information when the vessels returned. This map shows Magellan's voyage around the world, or very nearly around the world, in 1544. Europe finally gets on the printing bandwagon, which greatly speeds the production of maps. Line work could be printed repeatedly and then hand-painted colors applied to create the feel of handcrafted maps at a fraction of the time and expense. This is why you may see several versions of the same map from this time, but in different colors. The inclusion of elaborate borders and cartouches was often a reflection of the wealth of a cartographer's patron, and the ornate compass rose and sea monsters we think of as essential to an antique map. The Renaissance was a rebirth of art and science, and its impact was also felt on cartography. In addition to the practical explorative demand for maps, demand for classical works was renewed. Ptolemy was rediscovered, revised, and reprinted all over Europe between 1475 and 1730. Most of the images we have of his work come from reprints from this time period. Here's a recreation of his whole world map, and a recreation of his maps of Europe, and a recreation of sections of his maps of Europe. Here we can see the British Isles. Even the church got on the bandwagon of more realistic mapping. Fra Mauro was a Venetian monk whose map was remarkable in several ways. Like Islamic maps, it was oriented with south at the top. You can see the Arabian Peninsula here and something that looks roughly like Africa in this corner, Italy and the Mediterranean here slightly off to the right. Numerous inhabited places, castles, and mountains are depicted, distinguished in order of importance. But it also depicts many places not shown on any other Western map of its time. Here's a detail from that map. In 1506, Giovanni Contarini and Francesco Rosselli produced the first world map showing traces of the New World. You can see a little bit here, and a few things up here that might be the New World. But before you get too excited, here's a simplified drawing of what this map really shows. We have Cuba and Hispaniola. In 1506, Giovanni Contarini and Francesco Rosselli produced the first world map showing traces of the New World. Before you get too excited, however, here's a simplified drawing of what this map really shows. While Cuba, Hispaniola, and South America show up pretty clearly, that chunk of land that we might readily identify as North America is actually labeled Cathay, which is an old term for India. Contarini based his map on early data from Columbus, da Gama, and others who truly thought they'd found the East Indies. A year later, a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller drew this new land as a distinctly separate, although pretty skinny, continent. You can see North and South America here, the coastlines, and then something weird happening on the western side. A year later, a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller drew this new land as a distinctly separate, although pretty skinny continent, and labeled it America, considered to be the first to call it that. In 1524, Cosmographia by Peter Apian makes the first distinction between cosmography, mapping the universe, geography, studying the earth, and cosmology, the theory of the origin of the universe. It also included one of the first depictions of North America and was reprinted in 14 languages. Here you can see the little sliver of North America alongside this sort of chili pepper-shaped South America. Math is cool again, so cartographers start to develop new and interesting projections. Portolan charts make a comeback, since people are now madly sailing around the ocean. In 1569, Gerard Mercator improves upon Ptolemy and the Portolan charts by developing a cylindrical projection based upon the real size of the Earth that allows straight line bearings, which are essential to sailors. In 1570, Abraham Ortelius publishes Teatrum, the first world atlas. Mercator and Ortelius In 1570, Abraham Ortelius publishes Teatrum, the first world atlas. Mercator and Ortelius make some grand atlases, and the coffee table atlas as a status symbol is born. In 1584, Mariner's Mirror by Lucas Janszoon Wagenauer was published. This was the first atlas to show sea charts and coastal profiles on the same map, which was invaluable to sailors arriving somewhere for the first time. Notice the different scales for Spanish and Dutch miles. The Sea Atlas becomes available at a moderate price. National atlases also become popular. In 1579, Christopher Saxton produced the first atlas of Europe. Here's a sample from Britain. The Sea Atlas becomes available at a moderate price. National atlases also become popular. In 1579, Christopher Saxton produced the first atlas of Europe. Here's a sample from Britain. John Speed later produces the first national atlas of Britain in 1611 and 12, Theatre of the Empire of Great Britain. Here's his take on Dorset. So which way is up? Significant items were often placed at the top of the map. In Wagenauer's atlas, the coasts were always at the top, reflecting the viewpoint of a sailor coming into port. However, as compass navigation increased, north took on increasing significance. There is also speculation that the prevalence of European cartographers producing atlases during this period played a role. European empires were busy sailing around the world sticking flags in things, so that meant Europe needed a prominent place on the page. Also, the known world was getting larger east to west, which fit better on an open atlas page horizontally. These charts show the abrupt transition to north becoming the standard way of orienting the map during this period. Maps increasingly become a way of documenting territory. Urban landscapes became increasingly important political and spiritual centers, and were thus rigorously mapped at home and abroad. Here are two maps by Hogenberg, one of Exeter at home in England, and this one of Jerusalem, also a popular spot for European explorers. Many native maps of Mesoamerica were lost or destroyed during the Spanish conquest. However, they often used local knowledge to make maps of their own. Here's a map of Tenochtitlan, made by the Spanish cartographer Mendoza. Another map of trade routes as relayed to the Spanish conquistadors by native populations. Early North American indigenous maps also did not survive well. Many were drawn on the inside of birch bark canoes, engraved onto walrus tusk, or carved in. Early North American indigenous maps also did not survive well. Many were drawn on the inside of birch bark canoes, engraved onto walrus tusk, or carved in small pieces of driftwood, designed to fit inside a mitten for navigation on cold, dark winter days, and also float, because dropping your map while canoeing is a quick way to ruin your day. These Inuit driftwood maps These Inuit driftwood maps are examples of those small maps designed to fit inside mittens. Most of the early maps of North America are therefore products of English, Dutch, Italian, French, and Spanish explorers. Here's a map of Virginia by the Englishman John White. Surveying improved and distances on maps became more accurate. This map of France from before and after the 1693 survey by Picard and Laire shows that while they had a pretty good idea, surveying improved and distances on maps became more accurate. This map of France from before and after the 1693 by Picard and Laire shows that while they had a pretty good idea what the coastline looked like, they were a little fuzzy on the distance from inland places. The bold line here shows the revised coastline. In medieval-era China and Japan, maps were produced by central authorities for military, political, or administrative purposes. During the Tang and Song dynasties, 7th through 13th centuries by the European calendar, maps were submitted to central authorities on a 3 to 5 year basis. This map of the Yellow River was designed to evaluate flood risk. This map of Nucadadera is designed to identify property ownership and is created on linen. This map of Nucadadera shows property ownership and is created on linen. The Chonhado is a traditional Korean map, and the production of these maps was virtually unchanged from the 17th through 18th centuries. As exploration increased, so too did knowledge of the world, and mapping became a source of not only navigation but also establishing territorial claims. Champlain mapped the St. Lawrence region of North America in 1612 and boldly called it New France. The French and British competition for lands in North America is illustrated by their respective cartographies. In 1718, Guillaume de Lisle The French and British competition for lands in North America is illustrated by their respective cartographies. In 1718, Guillaume de Lisle published a map that compressed the English colonies, squished them up right here on the coast. Basically, the French and British competition for lands in North America is illustrated by their respective cartographies. In 1718, Guillaume de Lisle published a map that compressed the English colonies. Basically, everything that isn't those little demarcated colonies on the east coast is depicted as French. In 1755, the British respond with this map. This map by John Mitchell extends the boundaries of Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia all the way across North America. New France is this green bit up in Canada. Improvement in engraving technology meant more detailed prints could be produced and in greater quantities. Copperplate engraving allowed for meticulous line work and could withstand the pressure of thousands of prints without deterioration. The USGS continued to make maps from copper plates up until the 1950s. This map of Rome, created in 1748, shows every ruined column and bridge, detailed hills, and trees in orchards. That would not have been possible prior to this technology. Continued urban growth prompted large urban mapping projects, and bird's-eye views of cities became very popular. This is an example of a map of Paris, and again, very high detail created by this engraving technique. Toward the end of this period, we'll see the emergence of thematic maps, and Napoleon will bring about the metric system. We'll see a similar amount of cartographic evolution in the next phase, but over a much shorter period of time.